So, welcome to this virtual town hall brought to you by South Dakota Newswatch. Our topic this evening: colleges at a crossroads. My name is Jack Marsh. I'm the co founder and co chairman of South Dakota Newswatch. We are a nonpartisan, independent, nonprofit news organization serving the people of South Dakota. We provide in-depth coverage of issues of statewide significance. In these challenging times, in-depth and trustworthy journalism about complex topics has never been more important. And that's why South Dakota Newswatch, in its first 3 years, has become so vital to the people of this state that we treasure. We have produced more than 200 in-depth articles on about 150 separate topics, and they are available to you to view at our website, which is sdnewswatch.org. We do publish all of our material on our website and through our social media, and we also provide it free of charge to all media in South Dakota. So we hope that if this is the first time that you're aware of South Dakota Newswatch, we hope that you will check us out. And our database, all of our articles are completely searchable. We have timed this evening's webinar to a major project that was published by South Dakota Newswatch today, looking at the enormous challenges facing higher education in South Dakota because of this pandemic. And you can read those articles by Bart Pfankuch at sdnewswatch.org. Randall Beck and I, when we co-founded this organization, we thought that this was also an organization that could be a convener, a place where there could be civil discourse on serious topics. And so we have done that about half a dozen times this year. So maybe this is the first time you're aware of it, but we are so glad that you've joined us this evening. For those of you who are watching this live, you can use the chat feature to enter your questions, and then Bart Pfankuch, who's going to be our moderator this evening, he will. I'm sure he's going to select some of those questions to put to our panelists. To ensure its independence and credibility, South Dakota Newswatch does not accept advertising and is financed exclusively by voluntary donations and grants. So if you agree that a free, vigilant, and responsible press is vital to the health of our society and to our democracy here in South Dakota, we would certainly welcome your financial support. Due to a generous match, the impact of all donations that will be doubled if they are received between now and December 31st. So for more information about how you can contribute, go to our website, sdnewswatch.org. You can contribute online, or you can send a check or money order to the address that we note on our website. With that, it is my privilege to introduce the moderator of this discussion, which will go for about an hour. And our moderator this evening is the content director of South Dakota Newswatch, Bart Pfankuch. Bart?
Thank you, Jack, and thank you, and welcome to our panelists and all South Dakotans tuning in live, and those who are watching a recording of this town hall event sponsored by South Dakota Newswatch. As Jack noted, I'm Newswatch Content Director Bart Pfankuch. This week, Newswatch published a 4-part in-depth look at the status of higher education in South Dakota and across the country, both given the unprecedented context of the global pandemic that upended teaching and learning in myriad ways, but also amid what's been a series of ongoing and in some cases historic challenges to public and private colleges and the state university system that govern them. And among them, enrollment, a major driver of revenues, has been on a slow but steady slide at most schools. Tuition, fees, room and board have risen, and many students can either not afford to attend college, or they run up significant debt that burdens them with loan payments for years. And colleges themselves face the task of attracting new students, providing a strong faculty and curriculum, and producing highly valued degrees at a time of near constant pressure to keep down costs and amid intense competition from other institutions. It's safe to say that higher education in South Dakota and across the country truly is at a crossroads. And with that, I'd like to introduce our panelists. First of all, we have Dr. Lori Nichols, president of Black Hills State University in Spearfish. We have Dr. Brian Maher. He's the executive director of the South Dakota Board of Regents. You may know him also as prior to July, serving as the superintendent of the Sioux Falls Public Schools. Jennifer Felstad is a native of Groton, South Dakota, now a junior studying journalism and French at Augustana University in Sioux Falls. And we have Megan Redshirt Shaw, Director of Native Student Services at the University of South Dakota. So I'd like to welcome all of our panelists and again, all the viewers. What I'd like to do is give each of our panelists in order a minute or two or three to introduce yourself further, explain your unique role in higher education in South Dakota, and then share what you see as the top 2 or 3 issues or challenges facing higher education from your personal viewpoint. And we'll go right down the row, and I'll start with Dr. Nichols.
Good evening. Thank you very much. I'll just a quick introduction of myself. I'm actually a product of South Dakota public higher education. After I graduated from high school, I went to South Dakota State University and earned my bachelor's degree. So I've been someone who has benefited greatly from a really quality higher education system. I went to work, first of all, in K-12 education. I was a high school teacher. And then about 30 years ago, I made the jump or the switch to higher education. And I've been working in higher education, really much of my career has been in higher ed. And while I have worked in several other states, I have spent a little bit of time in higher ed in Nebraska and in Idaho and also in Wyoming. I have to say that most of my career in higher ed has been right here in South Dakota. I spent 22 years at South Dakota State as a dean of an academic college, and then as provost of the university. And then I've also was interim president at Northern State University for 1 year while they searched for a president. And now I'm at Black Hills State, and I'm in my 2nd year as being president here. I would have to say that I think most immediately, one of the greatest challenges that we're still in the midst of right now is navigating our way through COVID. And I know we're going to talk more about that today, but that has been an incredible challenge for us and something we had never really done before. So we had to learn on the job and on the spot. And it has been challenging, I think, for myself and certainly all of my colleagues across the state. You mentioned it already, Bart, but enrollment has been a challenge at Black Hills State, and I think also in more generally in higher education, especially in our part of the country. And it continues, I think, to be a challenge for us. And then the other piece I would just throw out there is that I think it is on us to become as efficient as we possibly can in higher education so that we can keep cost affordable to students. But at the same time, we have got to maintain quality. I think it's critical. So really being efficient while hanging on to quality. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dr. Maher, you're up next in our row across the top there. So we'll give you a couple minutes to introduce yourself and share what you see from your position as some of the challenges.
You bet. Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you to Randall Beck, Jack Marsh, and to you, Bart, for shining a light on this topic and providing this this medium to have this conversation. It's your energy and efforts in that area are really timely and necessary for not only us in South Dakota, but really across the nation. I would say in terms of a unique position, the uniqueness that I might bring to this position is that I've spent a career in K-12 as a teacher, as a high school principal, and as a longtime superintendent of schools. And as already mentioned, my last 5 years I spent as the superintendent in the Sioux Falls School District. So my perspective is one of always wondering what higher ed does to now being in higher ed and still trying to figure out what higher ed does. But I've had some aha moments in my first 6 months in the position. And I think probably what I see then as the issues that really are most worrisome to us or that we need to address are, number one, as Dr. Nichols pointed out, our reaction to COVID. Whether you are in K-12 or in higher ed, whether you are a student or just a citizen, your reaction to COVID, it's impacted everything we do every minute of every day that there's a reaction. There have been some lessons to learn from that, but there have been a nimbleness and your ability to adapt and adjust have been critical. And I would say that's one of the biggest things that we've seen in my 6 months in the position. The other thing I would say is the opportunity I've had to deal with the talent that exists in higher ed in South Dakota has been phenomenal. With Dr. Nichols and her 5 colleagues, our campus presidents at the public universities in South Dakota has been an aha and an inspiring opportunity for me. And then the other thing I would say that maybe keeps me up at night in terms of the position that I'm in is, how do we continue the funding so that we don't lose the quality that Dr. Nichols talked about? But also, how do we make sure that we continue to provide opportunity and access for all students in South Dakota? And then finally, how do we also make sure that we're meeting the needs, the workforce development needs for the state of South Dakota? As I tell people, higher education in South Dakota doesn't exist so that Brian Maher can have a job, although I'm grateful for it. It exists so that we can perpetuate the quality of life that we have in this state. And so we need to be nimble enough as a series of higher education institutions to continue that quest.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maher. Now I'll turn to Ms. Redshirt Shaw. You're starting a new position here with a lot of opportunities and challenges, and I know from speaking to you, a lot of excitement. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you see as some of the big challenges that are facing higher education from your vantage point.
Thank you, Bart, and thank you to South Dakota Newswatch and this amazing group of people. I'm really excited to be here. I'm going to introduce myself in Lakota first. Michajiki Megan Redshirt Shaw, Lakomi Chajiki Chankawashtanwi, Wazia Hanaha Hemataha, Malakota. My name is Megan. I'm an enrolled member of the Oglala Sioux tribe. I'm the new Director of Native Student Services at the University of South Dakota. I just began at the end of October, so certainly a challenging and interesting time to be starting a student services position, but I'm really grateful to USD and to the community there for their support in my transition. I am also currently a doctoral student in organizational leadership policy and development with a focus in higher education and American Indian Studies at the University of Minnesota. So I've seen challenges from both sides of supporting students and then also being a graduate student as well while this has been happening. I think that some of the things that I bring to the table with regards to higher education, I grew up in higher ed. I have 2 parents that have worked in higher ed for my entire life. I grew up on many different college campuses traveling. My mother is from Porcupine, South Dakota, and my husband is also from South Dakota and a product of the South Dakota system. And so I think that so much of my experience sort of coming in and seeing those different sides of it is really to serve Native students and serve Native communities and support students from different backgrounds. I think 2 of the things that I've really reflected on in the last few months of the position and then in working with Native students in the state here, it's really internet access in rural communities and then also financial stability for so many of our students. Many of our communities have responsibilities to home, beyond higher education, beyond pursuing education. So being able to be in contact with their families, care for their wellness, and then also be consistent as a student, I think has been a huge barrier for so many of them. And then obviously the financial responsibility that comes with being in higher education and feeling connected to their communities as well. So those are some of the things that I've observed. Again, I'm very grateful to be here with this wonderful group of people and looking forward to the discussion tonight.
Thank you, I appreciate it. And now we'll turn to our final panelist, Jennifer Felstad. And Jennifer, I want to give you an additional shout out for being here. I know your students are busy, and also this is possibly a new challenge for you to participate, but I really do appreciate it. So if you can tell us a little bit more about yourself and your views on where higher ed is at and some of the things that you're thinking about as a student.
Definitely. So I'm hoping to bring a student perspective to this conversation. I'm a junior journalism and French major at Augie. My role there is as an editor and reporter for the newspaper, the Augustana Mirror. And so not only have I lived the experience of last spring and this fall and all the craziness that COVID has brought to that, but I've talk to other students about it, reporting on it, and writing on it. So that's kind of my unique role in the situation, just sharing student experiences as best as I can. And then from that student perspective, I would say there's been a lot of adapting to uncertainty. And even without a pandemic, there's a lot of uncertainty for students as they go into different periods of higher education. And so just thinking about really valuing mental health in that time, and especially now during COVID, is really important to students. And then I think something we've learned from this time too has been the value of a personal education. So being able to be face to face and being able to know that students might have different preferences about whether they want to be face to face or online, or where their access is at, where their background is at. That's really important to think about moving forward.
Well, thank you very much. And I wanted to turn to one of the topics, and I'm going to stick with you here, Jennifer. One of the findings of our reporting was that there was a significant move to off-campus and online learning. And that, interestingly, was not just this semester due to COVID. That's the system, the public university system as a whole, has seen its on-campus face-to-face students taking face-to-face courses drop by about 18%. In the last 5 years. So definitely some market forces there, some adapting to changes in how students learn or want to access higher ed. But I think, Jennifer, can you talk about what it was like to shift to online learning in some cases, or hybrid courses? Do you see that as a part of the future moving forward? And I wonder also if you think that there's anything that is lost, or if the level of teaching and learning can possibly be as high in an online course as it can be in an in-person classroom.
So I think there are definitely some opportunities with the new move to some different online opportunities. And I think there are definitely some learning detriments. So with the move to online, I found that, especially being at home, there are more distractions for a lot of people. It's harder to learn the material rather than just maybe completing assignments to get done with them. So there's definitely a struggle with online learning, but I think the opportunity that it's opened up for people, and perhaps why some students are choosing, even without safety concerns in a pandemic, to go online. And that just has to do with different personal reasons. Maybe they thrive in that environment. Maybe they want to live at home and work from home. Maybe they like that. And the hybrid model, I think, has been a really interesting thing that could move into the future of higher education. So being able to take classes in person and online. So students in the classroom can interact with students who are not in the classroom. If someone's running late or simply can't make it to class one day, they can Zoom into class and get the same experience that they can if they do show up to class that day. So I think it's added a potential for increased flexibility and adaptability in education in general. So that's something that could be a really cool opportunity in the future, I think.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I wonder, Ms. Redshirt Shaw, do you see online as an opportunity, or possibly a drawback or a barrier for Native students that are striving to get into higher education and getting a degree? And you don't have to limit your answer to Native students, of course, but that's an area where I think that, and we're going to talk about an achievement and access gap, but where there's work to be done. And so I wonder if you could comment on your feelings about the shift to online learning.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that many of us that work in student services are thinking about is, how do you create community virtually? One of the big challenges that we're facing, for example, in the Native American Cultural Center, normally our capacity is 49 people and we're down to 12. So how do you create hybrid opportunities for students to be in community with one another when we're sort of thinking about social distancing and being challenged with those things that are being in care of community, right? That's us being good relatives to each other. I think one of the really powerful things about this opportunity to be online is that we can bring in national speakers, we can bring in people from other communities, we can close this sort of communication gap across Native nations and really be in conversation with each other about how we heal, how we move forward. I think Native people, historically, we've always adapted to the situation that we've been a part of. It's very cultural, it's very much a part of who we are as Native nations and as Native people. So I absolutely see it as an opportunity. I also understand how difficult that transition is for students who were experiencing being able to be together in person. But I know that so many of them are working so hard to continue to be connected to one another. And I'll continue to look towards it as an opportunity to learn and to grow as long as we're creating community for our students, for and on behalf of our students.
Yeah, and I know you talked about internet access, and that's certainly a challenge in a lot of communities. I think I would just make a plug for a sidebar story I did about Oglala Lakota College and how they've used their pandemic aid funds to really expand their ability to reach their students there. I was really touched by that. I think that that's a benefit, a real silver lining to what's been a really tough pandemic. Dr. Maher, I know that there's some revenue challenges that result from students. They don't pay room and board. That can be up to 40% of the revenue that each student can bring to campus. How do you balance this desire by students, pressure in some cases from the legislature to open the door to online learning and off-campus learning with the need to pay the bills, pay for quality faculty, and keep education affordable? I wonder if you can speak to that. That's a lot.
I can, and I think it'll be about an hour and a half for my answer on that, Bart.
You've got 2 minutes.
Okay, great. The first thing I would say is, I think so many times when we figure out what does the financial piece look like, at least my mind being new to higher ed went to, well, what's enrollment doing? And the first thing we saw as a system was our enrollment was down 2.84%. On the whole, we took that as very much a positive, that it didn't go down very far. But there are so many other layers to that onion. When you start peeling it, you realize that there are auxiliary services. And by that, I mean folks who are paying for a dorm room, folks who are paying for a meal plan, students who are going to games, or as in the case in most of our universities this year, not going to games. And there are a lot of income streams that are dying up, or drying up. So I'm a little bit nervous about what sort of lagging problems we have with this leading indicator of a slight drop in enrollment. I think I'm certainly worried about what that might mean down the road. Now we'll look at the enrollment second semester and see if our students persist from first semester to second semester, and we'll have a better view of what that looks like next semester. But it's not simply enrollment. It's a lot of the other revenue sources that are impacted by enrollment or a lack of enrollment that really have me the most worried as I think forward on that issue.
Thank you. Dr. Nichols, your university saw according to the stats I got off of the Board of Regents website, the greatest shift to off-campus learning. 27.7% of students who a decline in face-to-face learning there. How do you balance that with the need to keep your university, producing high-quality graduates and producing valuable degrees?
Yeah, it has been a huge shift and a challenge for sure. I would say that I would reiterate what Dr. Maher just said, is that when we have such a dramatic shift of learning from on-campus, face-to-face, students purchasing all those auxiliary services to online, where they may not be coming to campus at all, it really does throw your financial model off tremendously. And I think Black Hills State has been experiencing that, not just this year, but the last several years. And it has been challenging. There has been a lot of financial adjustments made in order to try to accommodate that, and do as much as we can to try to keep our halls filled and to keep many of the other services that we offer viable options for students. So I would just say that it's a challenge that we're working through right now. I'm not sure we have it all solved by any stretch, but we're certainly working on that. One thing I can tell you for sure is that it does make you stop and really evaluate your whole capital assets on campus, your buildings and your facilities, and make sure that you're using what you have to the best of your ability, to its capacity. And I know at BH, we have not been doing a lot of new building projects specifically for that reason. We're renovating and improving a few of existing buildings, but we're not out building a lot of new buildings right now because we know we've got a challenge with access or with utilizing what we already have.
Thank you. And I'll stick with you, Dr. Nichols here. Another one of our findings is that the long-standing achievement gap, especially in reading and math, between richer and poorer students, majority students, and students of color that's existed in our K through 12 system for generations now has gotten worse. And also we've seen a growing access gap, that it's more difficult for those students, not only in the pandemic, but over time, to afford college, to be able to find financial aid, to go through the enrollment admissions process and get the support they need to stay in school and graduate and find a path to a better life. I wonder, how do you see the university's role as someone over one school? What can you do to improve access for people who maybe have lower incomes, or maybe have had are in at-risk populations, or have had a hard time affording college?
Yeah, we saw that very much this year. In fact, this is one of the real concerns about COVID this year, I think, is that we saw at least that of our enrollment drop, almost 100% of it came from low income students. So, for example, our FAFSA applications this fall were down 17%. We were down about 85 incoming freshmen this fall from a year ago. And when we analyzed what that looked like, we really realized that those 85 students we didn't get would have been students who probably would have been all Pell eligible students. In other words, they would have fallen in that lower income category. So in fact, those were the students we did not get this fall. They just did not come to school. And we realized that is creating I mean, we've already had a gap, but it's making the gap even larger. And I know for me and many others, that's of great concern, because these are young people and students who really could probably benefit the most from a higher education. So, you know, what can we do? Well, double down and try to work with high schools to the best of our ability. In recruitment, we understand that these are, for the most part, first generation students. They're going to need more assistance, more help in understanding how to apply to school, how to access college, how to fill out a FAFSA application, how to fill out a college application. Many of them don't understand that you go to colleges and take tours and look around and make your selection. So trying to open our campus wide and making sure that they know that they're welcome and we'd like them to come and check us out and visit us. And then to also, there are many really good federally funded programs available, especially for first generation and low income students, and trying to apply, get those kinds of programs and offer them to students when they do come is really important, because it provides so much support to them so that they can be successful, we can retain them, and they stay and graduate. TRIO is a federal program that is well known and offers a lot of support to students. And I will tell you, we have a TRIO program at BH, and our outcomes from that program are phenomenal. We retain over 85% of the students who participate in TRIO. So anything you can do to offer support to those students, I think is critically important. And then the last thing I will just say is they will have financial need. And certainly getting them to apply for the Pell Grant will be key, but also trying to find any other access to institutional support, or if there are a few state programs such as the Opportunity Scholarship, making sure that they're applying to any and everything possible so they can put together a full financial package for themselves.
Thank you. Ms. Redshirt Shaw, I know you've worked on improving access to higher ed throughout your career and are uniquely positioned now in your new job to do so. Um, from your work and relationships, what have you seen as the barriers, and are there some that are overcomable, that there simply has not either been the funding or the will or the commitment to improve access to higher education?
That's a great question. And I just want to echo what Dr. Nichols was saying about opportunity for programs like TRIO and also helping students with the FAFSA. There are really amazing national programs, particularly for Native students. There are amazing national scholarship programs such as COBEL, American Indian Graduate Center, American Indian College Fund. I think it's really just about the conversations that we have within the state, across counselors, across our higher ed partners. There's so many phenomenal counselors in this state that are serving Native students in tribal communities and as well as in our large urban areas. It's just a matter of being in conversation with each other, right? So many of them are filled with resources, doing incredible things to support students in opportunities regarding college, regarding higher education. And I think just continuing the conversation here in the state. One of the really beautiful things about South Dakota is that it is a community-focused place. I have been really moved in moving here and in choosing to be here at how connected everybody is, how much people in education are in conversation with each other. And I think that the same goes for resources, really providing an opportunity to be transparent to students about what is available to them, compiling resources. There are a lot of creative ways that we can host events online around scholarships, host virtual college fairs online. We actually, my husband, Dr. John Little, and I just organized a 55 college fair in the fall for Native students. We had hundreds of Native students that registered for that. So really being creative about the things that we're doing in the state, open the world up for them. I think looking beyond even all of the great things that we have here, just to say, these are things that are available to you. These are things that are possible to you. I know we were talking a little bit about admissions and recruitment, doing things virtually, taking virtual campus tours, being able to look at these schools in really powerful ways. I think the world is going to move and it's going to shift, and we're just going to make the horizon brighter and bigger for our students. So I think really keeping that momentum forward, is even as we move into a year of healing, I think for higher education, for our communities, just continuing to be creative with the resources that are available and showing them what's possible. I think that's the most powerful thing that we can do for students.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to turn to Ms. Felstad. Is it important to you to have a diverse population on campus? How would you be affected as a student if higher education either became more elusive for people of lower incomes or of color? And is it important to you as a student to have a diverse student body on campus to attend college with?
Thanks, Bart. I think that is so important to our higher education communities. They make not only valuable friends on campus, but colleagues in classes, being in groups with them. I think it's been widely shown that having diversity really adds to creativity and being able to find a different frame of mind. One of the reasons we go to college is not only to learn necessarily a trade, but also to learn about the world and to have different ideas open up to us. And we simply can't do that without having people who are different from ourselves, from a number of different backgrounds. And so I think that's the importance of it. And it does bring about that effect of just adding creativity, adding a different perspective that is really important for an overall education.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And Dr. Maher, I'm going to come to you last on this question because you're uniquely positioned, having been in the K through 12 system and now in higher ed. And I'm going to challenge you with this. 20 years ago, as a reporter in Jacksonville, Florida, myself and some colleagues worked on a massive project looking at the achievement gap between richer and poorer. And in that community, it was mostly white and Black students. And the gap was wide, and it remains wide. Why has the K through 12 system and now the higher ed system facing new challenges brought on by the pandemic, but perhaps only worsened? Can you address why that gap has not been lessened? or do you believe it has been? But I don't think the stats show that. And I wonder what you feel hasn't been done or hasn't been done well to bring other parts of our population deeper into the education system.
Wow. First of all, I don't know that I can answer yes or no to the question. It's a complicated question. And I think sometimes because it's complicated, we're afraid to address it. But without a doubt, I would say that we must take care of our most vulnerable. I mean that from a socioeconomic standpoint. And unfortunately, there is a high correlation between that high socioeconomic issue and students of color. So we've got a real challenge as a society, and in South Dakota, the challenge is here as well. When I think back to the last 5 years in the Sioux Falls School District, I look at the growth that we had and the need that we had for more buildings. But the majority of growth that we had in the system was with students of color. That was the majority of growth that we had in the system. So think about that and move that forward as those students go from elementary school to middle school to high school, and then out of high school. And now what? We're a state that is starved for a workforce. We don't have any human that we cannot care about and want to be part of our workforce. So I think we have to look at opportunity for students and access for students. So how do we do that? And I don't know, I know, Bart, I'm not answering your question directly as to why haven't we improved in the last 20 years? I don't know that. But let me say this. Here's how I think we can improve in the next 20 years. And it's as simple as opportunity and access, but it's more complicated than that. Dr. Nichols shined a light. Megan Redshirt Shaw shined a light on a real simple issue that we can just talk about and then we'll all forget about it. But one huge barrier for students coming into higher ed is completion of the FAFSA. It sounds like a simple thing, but I had an educated father of a senior in high school tell me earlier this semester that when he was filling out the FAFSA, it was like doing a mortgage application combined with his insurance at the same time. Think about that. Think about how complicated that is. And then if I'm not positive that higher ed is something that's important to my family, and I came from a family like that, then I don't know that I'm going to continue to knock down that hurdle. So that's just the first barrier that we have. The second barrier I think that we have is the access goes beyond that. And even if I get the FAFSA and I get a lot of money that will help me go to school, there are all sorts of challenges financially once I get to school, even if tuition's paid for. And this is where I think another area that we can need to address, is in needs-based scholarship. As a state, we don't do a very good job in that area. I don't know that that's anybody's fault, but collectively, that's a challenge that we have as a state, and one that we need to address head on. How can we make sure that all of the students in South Dakota have an opportunity to go to higher education? And while I would love every one of those students to be in a Board of Regents school, for our state, that's not important. What's important is that they have an education beyond high school. We have tremendous opportunities in this state with our technical colleges, our tribal colleges, our private schools, and certainly our public universities. We have some tremendous opportunities here. So as a state, I think we really need to figure out, how do we make sure that all of our students have that opportunity? How do all of our students have access? And when we accept that as a state challenge and as a societal challenge, then Bart, I think we can look back 20 years and say, finally, we made an impact. But it truly is about opportunity and access. And if you'll allow me to ramble just a little bit longer, when I think about that opportunity and that access, and I think about the world that we live in right now, well, it'd be pretty simple for my kids. They're grown now. It'd be pretty simple for my kids to come home into an environment where education is valued And we could make sure that they have the nurturing, the mentoring, the tutoring, the environment that they need to continue on their quest for higher education. So quite frankly, it's not the kids of Brian Maher that we need to be worried about in this state. Rather, it's the kids of Don Maher, my dad, who had 7. I was the only one that went to college, and it made all of the difference in my life. So what about the other 6 of the 7 kids in the Don Maher family? How do we make sure that they have the opportunity and the access that Brian Maher had? It's made all the difference. It has made all of the difference. In education still, and higher education specifically, is still, I think, the best pursuit of the American dream, which is alive and well. I believe that. But we've got to make sure that everybody has that opportunity and everybody has access. I'll step down off that soapbox now.
No, that's why I asked to hear your thoughts on that. I know you're uniquely positioned. I think a lot of this comes down to affordability and money. It's an unusual time in higher ed in South Dakota. You've got 2 former long-term respected educators, retired educators, coming forward and pointing out that $250 million has been cut by the legislature for higher ed, in addition to cuts made at universities. And they're arguing that the quality of the education can actually go down if we continue to cut and not improve funding. At the same time, you've got a legislative panel, the Senate Bill 55 task force. They're saying they want to find efficiencies and look at all your operations. I'll stick with you here, Dr. Maher. I talked to a lawmaker, and he's quoted in the story, and I didn't quote him this, but he talks about bloated at the top, a battleship that refuses to turn. This isn't the first time that the legislature's looked at efficiencies, and it certainly won't be the last. And yet I wonder, 2 questions. Do you see the political will in South Dakota to improve education for higher funding for higher education, which has consistently fallen? And also, is there a risk of the quality of professors you can attract and retain, the ability to have strong curriculums and provide valuable degrees, at the same time trying to make college more affordable? Though again, there's a lot there, but I wonder if you could maybe, from your vantage point, how you see those things coming together, or don't they?
2 specific questions that you asked there, Bart, my short answer to both of them are yes and yes. Let me explain those. The first is, do I think there is a will in the legislature to have a quality higher education institution or system? And I might have paraphrased your question there, but I do believe there is. I've talked to a number of legislators in the past 6 months. I believe they want a quality higher education system. We might differ on how we believe we should get there, but I think there's a great appetite for a dialogue, and I'm optimistic to think that we can make some substantive changes to continue the higher education path that we're on. The second question is, if you continue to cut, will you get into quality? Without a doubt, you will. I don't know where that point of no return is, but once we get there, I think it'll be a fast fall, and I don't believe we're there yet. I see so many great things happening on the 6 campuses that make up the Board of Regents system that gave me great optimism. Just being new to this with fresh eyes, they give me great optimism for our state. So I think if we put all of that together, I think there's a good reason to think that we're headed down a good path. I also think when you talked about Senate Bill 55 specifically, and maybe if I was in this position and had more of a jaded view, maybe if I was in my 5th year or 10th year in this seat, I'd say, that doggone legislature, they're doing it again. But being in my 1st year, I think it's ideal for me. And I think as a system, we welcome the opportunity to say, are we handling the business that is the Board of Regents in an appropriate manner? We've got citizens from South Dakota on a task force. We've got campus presidents, including Dr. Nichols. We've got Board of Regents members, and we've got people, I think, that have the best interest of South Dakota in mind. That might mean we have to make some cuts. That might mean we might have to make some additions in other areas. But I think really the view is, how do we continue quality, and how can we make sure that we can afford that quality? That's a lot of stuff that I just threw into that, but I'm Pollyanna enough, for those of you old enough to know who Pollyanna was. I'm optimistic enough to think that we can make significant change in the world that is higher education in South Dakota.
You know, and I'd move to Dr. Nichols here. Is your university bloated at the top? Do you have a lot of unnecessary administrators? Are there cuts that you can make? You know, those are frequent attacks from the outside, and I'm sure that you've heard those before. But is there a way to bring the cost of what you're doing and how you do it down so it's more affordable for all students to attend?
Yeah, it's, if you ask me, do we have a lot of fat at the top? We don't have a lot of fat at the top, but is there ways that we can continue to drive efficiencies throughout Black Hills State University? There are, and we continue to work on it. Since I've cut almost $4 million from the university's budget. So it certainly is possible. I think the thing you have to really be careful of is that you don't cut so much that you just can no longer offer a quality education to the students who choose to come to BH. And I think that's always the balancing act there. I did want to comment though about your question about affordability, because while tuition and the cost of higher education in South Dakota is actually quite reasonable, we tend to kind of fall in the middle of the pack. We're certainly not the cheapest in the country, but we're not the most expensive either. We tend to be a very average, I would say, when you look across our region and across the nation. But when you look at affordability, we're actually one of the more expensive higher education systems from the perspective of a student. And of course, one of the best ways to look at that is just simply, how do students pay for college when they go? And we have a high percentage of students who take out student loans. And in fact, I think we're in the top 5 in the country. And so students many students in South Dakota, in order to afford higher ed, must rely on student loans in order to go to school. And of course, when you accumulate those over 4 years, they tend to have a high debt load by the time they graduate. And then that's on them to have to pay that off as they go to work, and just sets them back in many ways. So I do think it is probably our greatest challenge as a state, is trying to wrap our arms around affordability for students and try to figure out how can we provide that quality education that we just talked about, and how can we do it keeping it affordable for students so that they don't have to take out, I think on average right now in South Dakota, students who attend one of our technical schools, 2-year schools, are taking on average about $3,700 per year to go to school. And if they attend one of our 4-year public schools, they're taking out more like about $4,600 to $4,700 a year to go to school. And that's year in and year out until they graduate. So I know the average debt load of a graduate from BH now is about $28,000. And that's pretty high when you look at what the national average is and when you look at surrounding states. So I do think that's a great challenge for us that we have got to get our arms around.
Ms. Felstad, I wonder how you feel about the affordability of your college experience. You don't have to share if you've taken out loans, so you're certainly willing to do so for our information. But I wonder also about the value. Are you confident that the investment that you and or your family are making now is going to pay off? And I wonder also if there were some cutbacks on universities, one thing that could happen is you could have fewer administrators, but you could also have larger class sizes perhaps. I wonder, do you see your education that you're immersed in now as a good value, and how much is the affordability question on the minds of students today?
So starting with the affordability question, coming into higher education, it was pretty evident that everyone has to take out loans. I mean, it was kind of a given that at some point that would be necessary, and it stresses a lot of students out, I think. You don't have any money because you haven't worked necessarily a full-time job yet or something like that, you can't afford to pay for an expensive education. And so a lot of students are taking out loans and, I mean, looking for scholarships, looking for grants, but when those fall short, loans are the only option. And for a higher education, that's what a lot of students turn to for sure. So as far as the value of the education, yeah, I think that I'm getting a good value out of it. That's why I'm here. If I didn't think that I was getting a value out of my education, I wouldn't be in higher education. You know, I wouldn't go to college if I didn't think it was worth it. So my reason is being able to do a career that I love and that fulfills me. And I think that hopefully a lot of other students are able to pursue what they want to do as well. And some students maybe do it so they can get a better paying job than they could get without higher education as well. So I think there is a lot of value on the other side. Hopefully the quality of the education comes along with what we hope for in the value of that. That we are well prepared when we go out into the world. And yeah, class size, I go to Augie, which is a smaller school. And so I have a pretty small class size and I value that. That's one of the reasons I chose the school I did. It's great for discussions. It's great for getting to know your professor. So I think that there is a quality benefit to keeping small class sizes and to have a lot of different professors that you can learn from their experience and their perspective as well.
Thank you. And Ms. Redshirt Shaw, I wonder in how important affordability the question is for Native Americans in South Dakota. And is there anything that you can think of or see that could be implemented to help that population strive for a degree? And how important is that affordability issue for the students that you've worked with? And is there a solution that you see or ideas that you have that could remediate that?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that is really powerful about a state like South Dakota, we have 9 federally recognized tribal nations here in the state. Many of the campuses that are represented on this call tonight, all of our campuses are doing very creative things to implement strategies towards better recruitment strategies, better financial aid opportunities, more access to Native students. So I do want to take a moment to commend the BOR system and many of the campuses that I know are working extremely hard to close that gap and make that gap smaller. Of course, nobody could anticipate that a global pandemic would hit during a year where I know that there were a lot of really innovative and creative things that were happening for many of our campuses. I'm really excited to be at USD during this time. The revival of the Institute of American Indian Studies is happening. We are moving towards more scholarship opportunities for Native students. There's a tremendous team that has already been doing the work there to really sort of close this network and make it more community focused. I think one of the biggest pieces of advice that I often say to people about, and I know that we've been echoing that the FAFSA, like Dr. Meyer said, is one of the hardest things that any student can go through. Assisting many students who are even just trying to get tax documents from family members can be very, very debilitating. Many of our students who are low income first generation get flagged for verification, unfortunately, through the federal process. There's more documentation that they have to provide. My ask to people that work in education or that are watching this call tonight, I think one of the most critical things that we can do for first generation, especially Native students, is to make their extended family happen for them on campus. In Lakota, we say tioshpe, this concept of who's your extended family. And I think that really applies to higher education. I've been very grateful to the team in financial aid at USD, even in my short time, being able to call them on the phone, walk students over to their offices. These things really matter to students, even during a time where it's very difficult to be physically together. But even introducing them to people who can help them fill out the FAFSA or answer their questions about tribal higher education or scholarship opportunities that they've had. just really making those personal connections for students, I think, is critical and something that we should continue to apply across all of our campuses. It's not just the people that are in Native Student Services. It should be a community-focused thing across all of our departments, just to make the world a little bit smaller. And I really apply that especially to financial resources and opportunities on campus. But even in my very short beginning at USD and really being excited to be a part of that community, I've really been very, very grateful for everyone on campus who has worked really hard to continue to provide better financial opportunities for students. And I look forward to seeing how that continues to grow into the future as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I want to ask this is a question from one of our listeners, and that they say that, you know, maybe the pandemic has created not only challenges, but opportunities, and maybe an opportunity here, speaking of a crossroads, to recalibrate. What big dreams would you have for higher ed moving forward? And how are there ideas you have that you'd like to, you know, if you had a wish list of things that you think higher ed could be or should be? And I'll stick with you, Ms. Redshirt Shaw. If you could recalibrate higher education in some way, what would you look to do? What would be your dream?
I think that was Dr. Nora Antone who asked that question, who I love and appreciate and is an amazing educator here in the state as well. And I think that for Native students, it's really about honoring all of the knowledge systems that they bring with them into higher education and really empowering them to understand that combining their traditional ways of knowing can also be a part of their higher education journey as well. I think so many of our students are really committed to returning to community or to trying new places and really infusing who they are into that journey. I think Dr. Mara was saying before that higher education can be such a powerful tool to change your life and to make it a beautiful part of who you are, but really making sure that the things that are important about your cultural identity also come with you and are empowered in the classroom for you. So I think, moving towards this idea of how do we examine higher education for the things maybe in its past that were complicated, and how do we continue to move forward to empower students to feel like higher education is a place for them and it's a possibility for them. And it's so many of the factors that we talked about tonight, right? Financial resources, even knowing that those opportunities exist for them. I think my ultimate dream for higher ed would just to be bringing in those traditional ways of knowing and really empowering that to be a part of the system as well. But obviously, supporting more Native students through higher education within the state is a huge part of what I'm hopeful for the future. And I know even in spending this hour together with this incredible group of people, that there are so many people that are really committed to making that change happen here as well.
Terrific. I appreciate that. Dr. Maher, I'm on the search committee for a new director of the Board of Regents. Where do you see us in 5 years, 10 years? What would be your dream for where higher education could be in South Dakota in 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, well, I think we would increase the number of students, high school graduates who are actually participating in higher education. And I would extend that beyond the regental system to also our technical colleges, our tribal colleges, our private colleges, really to make sure that our students have a great K-12 education. That has to be the base, but then to encourage students to get beyond their high school degree and get education beyond that. So I think if I could pick one metric, it would be to look at our high school graduates and figure out how many of them are going on to higher education today versus 5 years from now. And if we've increased that metric, we're on the right path.
Thank you, Dr. Maher. Ms. Felstad, I wonder what would you want your children someday to experience in higher ed, say, if and when you had children, but where would you like to see things go? Would you, if you had a wish you could grant for higher education, what would that be?
Right, I hear a lot of stuff that students throw around, different ideas, because we're right in the middle of it all, experiencing it all right now. One thing that I think could be really recalibrated into the system is support for mental health, being a part of campus and on campus and accessible. I hear that from a lot of students. And so making that a part of the consideration, even with academics, and then honoring diverse perspectives, making the classroom a comfortable place for that, making extracurriculars a comfortable place for that. Working towards that is really the work that we're doing right now and should be doing for years to come, to make our higher education system more inclusive for everyone, which is, I think, something we've been talking about a lot tonight, which is really good. And then really just personalizing the experience with human connection, peer-to-peer connection, and connection with professors, different people on campus, continuing that in any way we can, I think is going to be really important for the future.
Terrific. Really appreciate that. Dr. Nichols, you have the last word in our
Great.
town hall discussion, but you've been in higher ed, as you said, a long time. And I wonder if there's something that whether it's today or tomorrow or next week or 5 more years that you'd like to see. What's on your wish list for higher education in South Dakota?
Well, I think as a native South Dakotan and somebody who loves the state dearly, I would just say my dream would be that and I'm going to say 10 years because this is going to be a little longer term, but that South Dakota would achieve an educational attainment rate of somewhere, maybe 55%, maybe shoot towards 60%. Where and within that educational attainment rate, it would mean that we were reaching a far broader audience in this state, including underrepresented students and low-income students who would have access to higher education. And while every one of those individuals would benefit greatly, as Brian Maher talked about, it changes lives, and it really does. I think who would really benefit from that would be our state. We would have a strong economy, and we would have just an amazing state if we could shoot for and hit a stronger educational attainment rate. And then I have to just say that a dream of mine would be that South Dakota would step up and figure out and support. Maybe the next big effort to support would be a need-based scholarship program or a need-based aid program for this state. It's the missing link right now. And I really think with it, we could do great things. So those are my 2 big dreams.
Thank you for sharing those. And thank you so much to all of our panelists for being here. I feel like this discussion has maybe moved the needle forward or will continue to spur greater conversation about where we are, where we can be, and what a real bright future might look like. So to all of our panelists, I want to thank you again for participating, and everyone who listened in as well and shared your thoughts and questions. I urge you all to go to sdnewswatch.org and check out the articles that are there for even more depth and background on what we've discussed tonight. But I want to wish everyone a healthy and happy holiday season. And thank you again for everyone for participating in a very valuable discussion. Have a great night.